be with you here today. I will try to keep this as energetic as we can possibly manage in the heat. Um, and then we're going to have time for Q&A. I have deliberately inserted ideas in here that I hope will be provocative. The idea is not for us all to agree, but to discuss. So, are you ready? Yeah, let's do it. Energy. Whew. Okay, so we're we're going to talk about this term that has suddenly started entering the chat. You've probably heard it, AI sovereignty. Like, what on earth does that mean? Right? So we're going to just absolutely break that down and destroy it. And then you can take that to your meetings and tell people why it's ridiculous. So, an agenda of what we're going to do in the next 25 minutes or so before we open it up to the group. We're going to look at sovereign AI. I put that in quotation marks. That's a passive aggressive move. You can tell what I think already. AI investment and financial risk. So when we're talking about AI sovereignty, we are not just going to be thinking about the technology stack, because who cares what stack you have if the entire thing collapses financially and we enter some sort of disaster scenario. Like, we're going to think much bigger and broader. And then sustainability. I would love to think that I have arranged for Europe to be under a terrible heat dome while having this conversation about the environmental impact of AI and how it is not currently a sustainable technology, but it was just a happy accident. So Mother Nature is the co-author of these slides for some of them. So let's get in very briefly. These are just the credentials because we have not had the pleasure of meeting yet. I come from Chicago. I'm based in London. I'm learning German, and I will inflict it on you afterwards, so look out. Or we can move to French if you want slightly more fluent. I'm a researcher by training, and I've learned all of my technical skills on the job because I am that old. And you can do that when you started working back in the early 2000s. So you'll see Accenture, lots of work with different sectors that we're going to reference here. Palantir, very controversial now. Back when I worked at it, which was before President Trump was elected the first time, it was slightly less controversial. Back to Accenture for research on cybersecurity. So security is my background. And also geopolitics, because I did a bunch of political risk analysis work at Oxford Analytica, based in Oxford. Academic credentials, you will note, have absolutely no technological skills whatsoever. I approach the world very much from a social sciences perspective and had to pair that with technology on the job. So I wrote this book a couple of years ago. It came out just after we were released from the pandemic in 2022, because I was very worried about many of the things that I was seeing being built and was indeed involved in building. And I wanted to open up a conversation that is very much linked about what we're having today about this topic of technology ethics. How do you build good technology? And by that, we don't just mean technology that does the job, right? The corkscrew that opens the bottle of wine. Great. We want to think bigger because there's a lot of ways you can design a corkscrew, right? And it can have positive and negative impacts, which I know all of you think about in your work as well. But I wanted to put it into a book that people could use. And that led to this show, because one of my thoughts about technology ethics is that it comes from cybersecurity, where they say that humans are your weakest link, right? Because people get tired or they're busy, and so they click on a link and they download something, and the next thing you know, you've got a massive problem on your hands. And so everybody in cybersecurity was always saying, to the point that it became like a mantra, humans are your weakest link. And I felt very depressed by this because I thought, well, what if humans were the strongest link? Or what if we could neutralize or minimize the risk of human mistakes and build for stronger humans, humans that work better with technology, more mindfully, who think better, who co-design, and who keep an eye out for risk and opportunity? What would that look like? How would I teach that? And so I wrote that book. And then I thought, nobody reads anymore. Damn. So my younger friends were like, you can't just write a book, you have to record an audiobook because they'll listen to your book while they're doing things. And I was like, okay. So I recorded the audiobook. But then I was like, you know what people still do? They watch TV and they're on social media. So I must take it. And you can see, though, this is a technology ethics argument. You can write the best book in the world, but if nobody reads it, you're not going to teach them. So I have to go and use technology to get the message out. And the message is the thinking methodology, right? And it's like deeply, deeply rigorous. So where better? Where better for a hacker to go, or for indeed any technologist to go, than to a pre-existing multimedia organization that broadcasts around the world on the radio, on TV, on social media, which brings in experts so we can demo things on air. We can show the public. We don't just tell them about AI, we show them. We take the camera and microphone all over, into hospitals, out where drones are being built by the military, into factories, into schools, and we see, what are people building? What's frustrating them? What do they want? What are they worried about? And we put it on TV, and then we put it out onto social media, and it goes out. And I think, this is my thesis to you, I think that in these kinds of conversations, and in hopefully the kind of work that my team and I have been doing now for almost 3 years, with every show that we do, we make that humans are the weakest link argument a little bit worse. And we make humans can be your strongest side better. And that turns out to be a very provocative position to have, because I couldn't have known this in 2022. I published my book at the beginning of the year. What happened at the end of the year? 2022, you were heading into Christmas. If you're American, you were doing Thanksgiving. And then this thing called ChatGPT started being mentioned. And generative AI suddenly became widely available to the public. And everybody freaked out. I tried to ignore it. It was the holidays. I was exhausted. Alas, I cannot ignore it. And now it's what we do every week. It's what we're going to talk about. Because technology ethics and the argument that technology is not neutral used to be really provocative. I used to have people who work in technology all the time say to me, technology is neutral. It's zeros and ones. It's math. And I'd be like, oh my God. No, it's not. Here's why. And we would talk about the design choices that you make, the materials you're building, where you source them, who sits around the table making those decisions, who's funding it. Are you taking dirty money to get your investment, or are you taking ethical money? Is your entire company run by men, or do you care about what other people think, right? Like we have to ask those uncomfortable questions. And it's fun. But the idea is to, because, from a capitalist perspective, because ethics can be capitalist, you want to build technology, I thought, not just that does the job the best, but that scales, right? Because scaling is money. You want all 8 billion people on the planet to be like, I absolutely love my insert product or service here, right? That you built. But how can you do that if you don't bring people into the design process and hear from them? How's it going? Do you like it? What can we do better? Oh, you'd like it to be more sustainable. Okay. It needs to work for left-handed people, not just right-handed people, right? Like really basic questions that you'd think we'd solved in our design process, but we don't, because we clearly don't have everything perfect. There's always room for improvement, so it's great. So now that we're in this brave new world where everybody's very excited about AI, and I know you've talked about that a lot today, and we all understand that it's not just AI, it's your data architecture, it's your human skill sets, all of that. I would like to take us to some of the very big macro things that might seem at first like, why is this lady talking to me about this? What does this have to do with my job, right? Or my company today? To which I would just say this: we are all pieces on a very interesting chessboard. Some of the talks that you've heard today are like, you are a pawn, or you are a rook, or you're a bishop, and this is what you can do better and the cool moves you can do in that role. Or you're on the white team or the black team and you're facing your opponents. It is sometimes quite useful to zoom out and be like, let's look at the board. Let's look at the history of chess. Let's look at what everybody else is doing who plays chess, and you can learn. So sometimes we need to go up a bit. That's what we're going to do together. So get ready. Sovereign AI, so-called. I wanted to bring Jensen Huang into this conversation early because you are going to see a slide that comes after this that proves that this deck was not made using AI, because I designed it deliberately to make you remember it, and it's going to look ridiculous in a moment. So let's let him look serious now. Here he is. This is the CEO of NVIDIA, right? One of the most powerful, successful companies in the world. Everybody wants what they are building, right? So when he talks, People listen, rightly so. At the World Economic Forum in January, he decided to also go into the social sciences world for a moment, not just talking about technical stuff, right? AI is infrastructure. Every country should treat AI like electricity or roads, which I actually very much agree with. Where I'm going to part with him intellectually, and I invite you to get in on this action for the Q&A, is where he goes with it next. Every nation must own the production of its own intelligence. Because does it scale? Does that scale? Is that efficient? Do we want everybody building their entire own tech stack because they're very worried that the United States is going to flip a kill switch on a model? A legitimate concern. We'll go into it. Are they worried about China? Probably. Are they worried about Russia? For sure, right? And probably about America for sure. So we have to think about, like, does that scale? Is that financially viable? You might have all sorts of reasons, you might love to build your entire full tech stack, but you actually just can't. If you're in the European Union, you're going to be working together across different countries, playing to the best of everybody's strengths. But why stop there? You might think, what if I'm the EU and I build out and work with other middle nations, to use the term by the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, Canada geographically being gigantic, but despite being a G7 member, not an AI superpower. So when we say the middle nations countries, that's what we mean there. It's not a slam. It's still a very respectful term, but what we're doing is differentiating from the United States and China, the two big AI giants, and then there's everybody else, what they can do. Rather than trying to turn yourself into a United States or China, you could work together. And everybody's playing to their strengths, but that requires trust. And I think that's actually where Europe has many, many exciting advantages that we're going to discuss. So we want to look into that, and we're going to dig into that statement hard. I also want to push back on it for the second reason, which is that even the United States and China are not fully self-sufficient in their AI stack, their technology stack. And we're going to show that. So you're going to hear this a lot. I hope I'm going to give you some reasons to push back and go, we don't have to be like these two big countries in order to do AI well and even better and be competitive. And they don't even do it. So let's move on to a more interesting argument, which we're going to do. The handmade slide. This is a deliberate psychological technique where you create something that's so ridiculous so that people remember it, right? I want you guys to be traumatized by this. So, we had him looking wonderful at Davos. Now he's walking around on stage like me right now, wearing his leather jacket, not 80,000 degrees outside. And he is saying the quote that he gave in January, that AI, sovereign AI, is like a 5-layer cake. Kaffee und Kuchen analogy. We love it. I built it. It's not very cake-like. My graphic designer, who is a human being, was like, it's not a cake, because he's acting like a 5-layer cake would suggest that each layer is equal, right? Like a cake. But it isn't. It's more like a pyramid. He won. So that's why we're going to do our layer cake looking slightly like a cakey pyramid. So when we're talking about AI sovereignty, and we use the Donald Trump administration just flipped off the kill switch on Anthropic a couple of weeks ago, we're over here in layer 2, AI models, right? And that's where you're seeing most of the news media focus, everybody that's talking about this on LinkedIn and won't stop, right? That's where they are playing at. Mr. Wong invites us to go slightly bigger in our thinking, which we're going to do. He starts out with the foundational layer of energy. And he's like, AI requires huge amounts of power, so you've got to think that through. We talked about our people's electricity grids ready to go. Clearly not. But it isn't just that. I actually think there's another layer to this that we would put under it, which is, what's your energy sources? Are you going to build your AI infrastructure model off of dirty fossil fuels, renewables, nuclear? What's your mix? And there's no judgment there, by the way. Like, everybody, we are where we are on the planet with this, but I'm just saying we need to think it through. And there's a different cost profile to that. There's a different investment profile to that, etc. If you're in the United Kingdom, which really wants to be the number 3 AI superpower in the world, we talk about it all the time. I'm always like, anybody who talks like that, I'm like, yeah, but our electricity prices are the most expensive in Europe. We have a structural limitation in the UK that they don't like to talk about, right down at the foundational layer. So when you think about who in Europe, zum Beispiel, who in Europe has a really sexy energy profile? Who's got options? Yeah, France, vive la France. Why France? What does France have that most people are not doing, including this country? Ton of nuclear power. I think like 80% of their electricity is nuclear generated. It's crazy. They could be sharing some with their German friends, right? And you could start working together. We could call it a European Union, right? And start, right? Like we could do this. We could do this. And we could build with that in mind of how do we want to get the mix right? Because you also want to be resilient, right? Stuff goes down. You've got to plan for failure. So what's your business continuity strategy, national security strategy? You're going to build infrastructure up here in the sexy application space where everybody's focused right now. And you want to get AI into healthcare and finance and logistics and food and everything. That's great. I'm loving it. But if you're not secure down here, if you're not resilient down here, you've got a problem. That's where your geopolitics will come in and your economics will come in, and you will hit the hard reality of the market. So we have to look at the chips and computing infrastructure. Do you think that most people, most countries on this planet are going to be able to suddenly just start making the most competitive chips? No. Like, of course not. Where are they largely made at the moment? What's the supply chain look like for these chips that we all desperately want? Taiwan, and go bigger. If you had to draw it on the map, what would your circle be? Is it here? No. Yeah, so East Asia with, is there anyone Dutch in this audience? Yeah, friends of the Netherlands. Lekker. That's right. So ASML, the one choke point in the entire discussion of chips and computing infrastructure, is here in Europe, which is a real nice advantage point. If people start getting a little bit twitchy and flipping kill switches on people's models, you could be like, well, guess what? I guess we don't have any lithographic machines for you, right? Like two can play at that game. And when China wants to be all, well, we're going to hoard the rare earths, that will be one of Europe's fighting points, right? And that's unfortunately sort of where we're at right now. And it's the language that many of these world leaders respect when negotiating. So just remember, like everybody's got their strengths and weaknesses. Cloud systems, again, lots of talk about AI sovereignty. Who are the 3 biggest providers of cloud? That's right. They're from the United States. So if we were doing, we must be honest with ourselves, like we are where we are. If we wanted to strengthen any of us, we're in Europe, so we're having this as a European conversation, but we could have it, frankly, anywhere in the world. That's the beauty when you get your methodology right. You can apply it everywhere. Since we're in Europe and we're talking about like what would it mean to have sovereign AI in Europe, we would be like, okay, well, we're using 70% American suppliers for cloud. I don't like those optics. So how do we fix that? And we won't fix it in a day, but what's our 10-year plan? What's our 5-year plan? How are we going to do this? It doesn't, like the value is not just up in the application space or even in the model space. That's what gets lots of the headlines. But this, I think, is also really useful. But I also want us to look at this and think it's missing a lot, right? Like it's simple. Fair enough. Mr. Wong was giving a layer cake analogy for the tech stack, and he's thinking like an engineer would. Fine, but we can go better. We can have coffee, kuchen, and all sorts of tea accessories to go with our analogy. We want to talk about, you can have all of this, but how's your data? Do you have a rich and varied data set? Is it complicated? Is it messy? Is it structured? Is it ready for AI versus it's kind of stuck 10, 15 years ago? Like there's a whole piece of work just around data architecture. I also think the human factor is missing. Again, you could have this perfect, but if your entire workforce is like, don't really know how to use this, don't feel very confident with it, really don't want to get sued, don't want to upset the regulator's like, we don't want to hinder innovation because the government's telling us don't regulate too tightly or we'll strangle the AI growth that we all desperately need because there's nothing else that's really driving growth right now, for better or for worse. Everybody's kind of hesitant. So we were hearing in some of the presentations earlier about that. The biggest area is Goldman Sachs was reporting on AI return on investment in 2025. Now we're in June, so it's 6 months out of date, but still, I loved it because they were like, basically, it's zero. We're seeing it for software developers and customer support. People who put their money into AI in those areas, they're seeing measurable gains. Everybody else is reporting it in terms of like individually, but in terms of is it really feeding into massive productivity gains? That I think it's just early. It's early, but it's not showing up yet at scale. So we need the data component in here. We need the human talent and comfort and skills and knowledge level component. That will be the work of education at schools, but also for all of us who are still working, we can't all go back to school. Like we need to be educated on the job. That costs money. You got to do it. Bite the bullet and invest in training your people now. There's also the governance question because this is going to get messy, right? It's going to get very messy. And we're going to go into some of the areas that I think are going to lead to conflict, political issues, calling for more regulation, etc. Humans tend to build first, make a gigantic mess, and then somebody has to go in, pass some sort of legislation to clean it up and make sure this never happens again, right? That's our iterative process. That's not captured here, but it will absolutely affect this. Right? So we have the beautiful image, but we know that there's like a shadow image, right? There's stuff around it. There's what's in the picture and then what is outside the picture, but you feel it. So we've articulated some of those. I really want to dive into this layer and get you just thinking a little bit. We talked about this, why this matters, right? Like it's great looking at it from the money-making capitalist perspective, but like make no bones about it. This is pure, hard geopolitics as well, driving every decision that we saw on the previous slide, right? So this is Chris Miller. He won the Financial Times Best Business Book of the Year award a couple of years ago for Chip Wars, which if you have not read it, I really recommend you do. It still stands the test of time. It's so good. So good. And he talks about the next era between these two superpowers is the US and China. It's all about computing power. And I added, and that depends on chips and where are they made. So you think, okay, this is a US-China discussion. I'm here with you. Oops. Voila, the graph. So I know this is a long way away. I come from Chicago, so every now and then I like to spin my old-fashioned globe on my desk and be like, how does this problem look from elsewhere? Like I literally move the map around to make me think differently. And it's really interesting to be like, gosh, Taiwan is very close to China. I think it's really close. And TSMC makes all of the chips for everybody, more than 90% of the most advanced chips. But they're not the only ones. So like, yes, China could move on Taiwan, and we need to talk about the implications for that. But we also want to be aware South Korea's in the mix, Japan's in the mix, Singapore and Malaysia are in the mix, right? China is meanwhile, because of US export restrictions, trying to just make its own stuff. They're buying NVIDIA stuff off the black market, but they're also trying to make their own things with Huawei and others. Right? So we want to be just mindful of what this means for us. Like, where does Europe fit in? Where does the rest of the world fit in? And that is why I drew this. So we were looking at that. We were over in Asia Pacific. We're aware that the United States is obviously heavily invested, involved in thinking, and that they've got a new TSMC plant in Arizona, but it's not making the most advanced chips. So the United States realized that it maybe didn't do such a great thing in the 1990s and early 2000s to outsource all of their chip manufacturing to the Asia Pacific region because it was cheaper to do. Now it's a geopolitical risk, but back in the 90s, different time, politically, it seemed like a no-brainer, right? So we created our own vulnerability for ourselves in the US doing that. But we've talked about the Netherlands because of ASML, like they can't move without that. Right now, the Netherlands specifically, and the European Union more widely, has a choke point that no one else can replicate. No one. It's incredible. These machines travel with a team of engineers who work on them 24/7. They cost millions now. the lasers that they use to write on the silicon are so precise that, at least in Chris's book, he said when he interviewed people from there, they could hit a golf ball on the moon from Earth. Like it's like the mind boggles. Incredible design and just general AI is coming out of Israel. Now, we now know that's a massively fraught area of the world because of the United States' decision to start a war with Iran several months ago. And that takes us back, because we can do this with our wonderful analysis, when we were looking at where to put your data centers, right, in the cloud systems section. Only a bit more than a year ago, the United States was like, what if we put loads of data centers in the Middle East? Doesn't that sound like a great idea? Let's give them our best chips also. The ones that we currently don't want to sell to China. We will trust our new Middle Eastern friends with this for several reasons. Why? One, we need the money. Who's got a lot of money right now? UAE, Saudi, right? Two, data centers famously need a lot of energy to run on. What energy could they possibly have in the Middle East? Lots of fossil fuels and some solar. Downside, it's super dry, so they don't have a lot of water. It's a design constraint that the engineers are now working on. But when I was going through this with several clients, I was like, if you're putting stuff in the Gulf, you are really, really close to, and I have a slide showing it, missile range from Tehran and indeed the rest of Iran, which is a risk that has now manifest. So you're hearing a lot less about the data center build out in the Middle East than you would have been a year ago, which for some people, including the people who invested in that, must come as a very nasty surprise, but wouldn't come as a surprise to someone with that. Because if you're thinking about the whole stack and you're measuring for risk, you're looking at each one of these factors and going, what are the benefits and what are the risks? And the risks are never just technological. That's where your social sciences is key to this kind of understanding. So we've had our global tour. We're like, bring on section 2. I'm here for you. We're going into the finance section because we have to talk about one of the other big structural risks of AI, as well as an opportunity. They go together like a terrible, terrible coin. And that's the financial investment and risk perspective. So, does anyone know roughly what percentage of the S&P 500 is linked to AI? We're talking like everybody's pensions is going to be affected with this, all of the big investment. What's driving the US economy right now? The AI build out. We're looking at, like, they think 33% of the S&P 500 is affected by investment in 7 big US tech companies, which, if a bubble were to burst, just would be something we would have a different presentation about. So let's look at it. When we say things like, and I have to do this in the UK a lot, I'm like, imagine the solar system. Okay, you have the sun, you have Earth, you have the moon. These are all objects in our solar system. And everyone's like, yes, right? But some of them are bigger than others. So everyone's like, yep, got it. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. And you have to show them how much bigger the sun is, even compared to Jupiter, the biggest planet, even compared to Earth, where we live, and then our little friend, the moon, that orbits around us. Similarly, we can do this with financial graphics. When we talk about the UK, which is here, I respectfully put Germany in red to greet you today. It's just not even a question. It is not even a question. When we talk about how far ahead the US is, just in terms of the financial investment, and that's of course because it's not largely coming from the government, it's coming from private sector, which is what makes it really different to the Chinese investment. Yeah. Very different financial models will come into play in this discussion. Now, you could push back, and I hope you would, and say, but we're in the European Union. We're not just doing this at the national level. We are also part of a collective of 27 countries plus your Brexity friend, the UK, over there. So if you added everybody up, that actually still comes to a pretty respectable number. Okay, cool. Let's crunch numbers just for this year alone. This is what the US leaders such as Meta and Microsoft are setting just for this year, $725 billion. Like these are massive sums. China is like, okay, we're doing like our 5-year plan. We've got $295 billion to put in to data centers. And the EU, now they are getting ready for another discussion of the next 5 years. So we want to see what they're going to come up with. But according to Bloomberg, we were talking like at max another 4 to 5 billion. So like, right, just there alone. I don't necessarily think this is a problem though. Like there are advantages to letting somebody else do the heavy lifting and go first. It's also super inefficient. There's a lot of churn. There will be a lot of winners. There'll be a lot of losers and just a lot of waste. That's the American model. We can see that, but we just want to be mindful of it because it means that if you are not in that country and you want to be more effective with your resources, you want to be really clear about where you are investing and where you're like, we don't need to do that. That's not what we're good at. We live next door to somebody who is, or one of the people in our middle country trade agreements can pick that one up. We're going to have to work smarter and more efficiently. Great. Perhaps we will turn that into an advantage. Like it's all to play for still. We're so early in this game. And the United States, because it's so dependent on this, has a very big risk. When we talk about the bubble bursting, folks, it's like Enron style. The amount of dealing that is going on and cross investment and trading, it's very opaque. It's super hard for regulators to trace it. Journalists are trying to trace it. I bring you this from our colleagues at the Financial Times. I really like it. It's on my thing. It's like will this be a historic document one day, right? When it all just blows up. And I can say that because I started working in technology right at the dot-com boom. I saw Enron. I saw the dot-com bubble burst. I saw the financial crisis in 2008. Like one of the joys of being older is you have like lived through enough of these and you've seen it and you look at something like that and you're like, this gives me a very bad feeling. And then our colleagues at Bloomberg went deeper, pretty much at about the same time. The zeitgeist was clearly doing something. Now, this is from October, but it's only going to have gotten more complicated. By the way, the numbers will have only gotten bigger. The concept still stands. So we're looking at circular deals. And when we start seeing how inter-involved everyone is, if I give you $100 million, but you have to buy my stuff with that $100 million, is that really a deal? Or is that like a loan? Right? And I look at this, we've got OpenAI over there. I draw your attention to it and also here, just sort of flip back in between. So OpenAI is involved with all these people. And then we see it over there, blah, blah, blah. Like it doesn't really matter. The concept is the web of dealing. And then you hear Sam Altman come up with an idea that seemed like such a nice guy thing to say, which was like, what if the United States government took a share in us? Maybe all Americans could have a little bit of OpenAI. And I was like, oh God, that sounds a lot like a bailout. You're not profitable. You're really not profitable. And you're super connected to everybody else. And now you're talking about Uncle Sam taking an equity stake in you. I am not reassured. So that's on my risk radar now. I hope it's now on yours. And I know this is being recorded and will go out onto the internet. So if anyone at OpenAI ever watches this, wants to get in touch, let me know. Because I don't like it. I don't like it. A lot of people don't like it. And again, we're early days. We don't know where this is going to go. So now that we've had some exciting geopolitical fear and some financial fear, along with all the opportunities, because we know this is very exciting, we have to talk about AI and sustainability. So I was very lucky to interview one of the top researchers in the world about this topic at the Edinburgh Book Festival. She wrote a book called The Atlas of AI, which if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. It's very slim. You could read it on the flight back to London, for instance, if you were me. She talks about how AI as a concept, and we get back to that educating people thing. AI as a concept feels very nebulous. People don't know how to visualize it. And we talk about things like the cloud, and people will hear that, understandably, and go, the cloud, and imagine a cloud like in the air, right? You can't touch it. And what she does is absolutely put that to rest. She maps it out. Some of you here work in logistics and supply chain, you're going to love this. She shows you the physicality of AI, the minerals that have to be pulled out of the ground to make the chips, the human labor, the maps that I've shown here. She would love that. She has in fact mapped out an AI system so beautifully that it is in the Museum of Modern Art in New York. You can also see it online at the Design Museum and the V&A in London. Their websites host it. She maps it so that you can see it. This thing that you end up having in your house, this service that you're just sort of interacting with, it's physical. It has costs along the entire chain. And you could decide to make them more sustainable if you wanted, because of course there's a massive footprint to this. And when she was presenting this work and talking about her book, she made this comment. And with my broadcaster brain, I tuned in. I went, wait, what do you mean the question of the environmental cost of AI is the biggest secret in the industry right now? Now, this was a few years ago. It's not so much of a secret, but how much water is being used? How much energy is being used when you are using generative AI to chat that is far more energy and water intensive than like a normal Google search? Now, they're working on improving that. You will hear them constantly say that they've solved the water thing. Like, no, they have not. Right? So you need to know that. And you obviously also want to report on it, right? If you were the regulator, if you're like, do I want someone to build a data center outside my city or not? Right? They'll go, it will create lots of jobs, blue collar and white collar. And you're like, great, we love jobs. And then you're like, but it's going to suck all the water out, which has happened, right? So people's electricity bills go up the closer they live to a data center. And Bloomberg has mapped that. And we saw when OpenAI partnered with Microsoft and they put a big data center outside of Des Moines, Iowa, not far from where I grew up. It's a big farming agricultural area. The farmers noticed because there was less water. The city noticed because there was less water. We are already entering into an era of water scarcity, and with hot temperatures like this, that's going to become a very big political issue. In fact, it already is. Data centers are now one of the most reviled things in the United States, despite this boom that we keep hearing about. They are on discussions at elections for mayor for the states. They will be on the agenda for the midterms in November. It's like what I'm showing you here isn't just for people who wear Birkenstocks and like the environment and earth. It's a political issue now. It's affecting candidates. These companies with their billions and billions are investing heavily to make it so that they don't have to be transparent on this because they could share this information. When people say, we have no idea what it takes to power AI or how to make it sustainable, they absolutely do. They're not sharing that information. And it's blown all of their net zero targets. And they're doing it anyways. What you do with that information is up to you. I am just here to be your messenger. And it matters. So we want to, at least as a researcher broadcaster, my job is just to put it on your radar and go, okay, well, we're sharing the problem with the public. I don't have the receipts for you on all of these things, but I can tell you this is a thing. And it's a thing we want to talk about. This is old data. This is GPT-3, but it actually illustrates the point because, again, people don't assume that when they're having a chat with ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, they don't link that to water. So I have stood on stages with people with a bucket of water and just dumped half a liter of water into that bucket, and we all have to stand there awkwardly while this beautiful fresh water goes in the bucket. And then I'm like, okay, was that worth it for you to be like, I've got some food in my fridge, what dinner can I make with this? Like, was that the best use of your half a liter of water? And also, how do we solve it so that's not happening at all? Can we recycle? What other cooling mechanisms are there? Those are design choices. They're also priorities, and these companies respond if people make noise. So we have to think about that. We could at least make them be transparent and show what they're doing. That's the bare minimum. And that matters because we're looking at where the data center build-out's going. We've got our Jensen Huang cake layer in mind. We know that's the foundational layer, and we know that data centers is pretty close to the middle. Where you are building out, look at the heat map. These are not random questions. They are design choices. You can optimize for energy, you can optimize for water at the moment. There are people talking about putting data centers in space. We did an entire show on it, not just Elon Musk, other people, serious people who are ex-NASA, okay? It sounds crazy, and it probably is crazy right now, but there's an entire argument about maybe putting them on Earth is not the most efficient thing we could be doing. There's a massive engineering physics problem to solve with putting them in space, but the point is, it's on people's minds for a reason. And that is why we saw so many people talking about bringing nuclear power back. I know that's a very controversial, or perhaps I'm using the wrong word, sensitive issue in Germany after Chancellor Merkel's decision to take Germany away from nuclear. Totally respect that that's the conversation that was happening here. Other countries have obviously decided to keep them or indeed build them, and now you're getting tech companies themselves talking about building them, not waiting for government. Building small modular reactors. That sounds like a quick win. Great, we'll just be nuclear powered. That's a 10 to 15 year infrastructure bet. It is not cheap. Not everybody can afford to do it. There's also the full ethical security question of like, do you trust a tech company to run a nuclear reactor, or do you want that being run by the government? What oversight is there? How does this work? So that's where you're seeing that. And it matters if you're interested in the future and you've got the layer cake pyramid stack in mind, you want to know what's powering all of this and who can afford to build this and who can't. And if you just don't want to use this option, what other options you have, as neutrally as we can have that discussion. So I hope that that was enough provocation for you. I am available for Q&A if we have time. I can also stay for a little bit afterwards if you just want to chat afterwards. I'm looking in the back. Is that a yes? We have some time? We do have some time. So I think there's a QR code that you can scan. And we're also going to be joined by our wonderful moderator for the event, and we can get into it.
Sounds great. I am the conduit. Exactly. Thank you. So if you'd like to join the conversation directly with Stephanie, I heard quite a few whispers going on, so I'm hoping we'll share some of those thoughts here on the stage. So same as before, it's a scan, ask a question, and we'll go from there. So there were a couple that were submitted during the session, so I'll just kick it off.
Terrifying. I'm ready. By the way, can we just say we have not rehearsed this? I have no idea what's coming, and I deliberately said I don't want to know.
Basically.
So hit me with your best shot. Let's do this.
How do we distinguish between a technology that reflects societal biases and one that actively amplifies them?
Ooh, who's the philosopher in this audience? Reflects versus amplifies. So amplifies is going to be taking it louder, whereas reflecting is more like a mirror, right? I'm just showing you who you are, but I'm not taking it louder or more intensively, would be my philosophical differentiation.
Yeah.
But can we get to a concrete example to show that we really understand the concept? So social media is a good example of amplifying. It gives everybody a voice, right? But everybody gets super loud, but not all people get loud equally, right? A lot of people get bullied and terrorized, and it's also happening in different languages. So some people are super loud. I'm just going to say Americans as an example, because we are. But like, for instance, a lot of men are on social media doing all sorts of interesting things, and a lot of women are like, I don't want to be part of that because I'm getting stalked, threatened, like having to go to the police about it, or just having deepfake non-consensual pornography generated about me, which is not a nice way to be online. And a lot of men are like, really? That's a thing that happens? And I'm like, every woman journalist, every actress I know has to deal with that. Like, imagine, that's your life. And then people are like, why aren't you online anymore? So that's a great example of amplifying like some of our worst trends. But in terms of reflecting, a nice reflecting example of technology, I feel like it's going to maybe be around the discussion that we're having with the role of children. Because I actually feel if we're ever going to regulate not just AI, but technology in general, that's like the one area where everybody does get together and goes, you know what, we can maybe park the capitalism stuff for just a second. And we're going to draw a line that there's a group of people who are so vulnerable and need us, like they can't vote, they can't drive or run away, like they can't exercise the normal choices that the rest of us can do. They are counting on us to do something better. And so that is conceptually an example of it reflects back to us what we care about. So do we want AI in schools, or do we want kids like reading books and being outside in forest school and learning the classic stuff first, and then they get introduced to AI at a later point? That's a conversation you could have. But also, do you just want to ban social media for kids? You're seeing a lot of countries decide, like, yes, they do. The UK has done it, or is doing it. Australia has done it. There's just big discussions of maybe it's just not a safe place for children at all. And that's because of us. That's reflecting society back for us. So that's not so much of an amplification. I'd say that's a reflection. Mm-hmm. So those are, I hope, we can discuss if those are the strongest examples I can do under pressure, but I think that would be how I would see it.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really strong analysis given the setting as well. So here's maybe one that leans in more into the presentation itself. What's your take No. What do you think about including the environmental consequences into pricing of AI?
I love this question. It absolutely should, in the way that like flying should, or all sorts of other things where there is absolutely a cost, but it's not being reflected in the number. I think obviously you are all very beautiful people and physically fit, so none of you have ever had to go on a diet and thus know what calories of something that you're eating. But if you've ever had to, or if you just decide to clean up your nutrition, it can help a lot if when you go to buy food, it says here are the ingredients if you got any allergies, and here's what the calories are. Because you might be like, oh, I really want that one sandwich, but for some reason it's half of my daily calories. Is it the mayonnaise? Versus if I have this salad that's very protein packed, I get all my nutrients, I will make the healthier choice. You might not have been able to make that choice in that moment of weakness. You're starving, you have 5 minutes to buy something for lunch, unless you had the information clearly presented to you. I think the same is true when you are picking AI models. Can you shop around for your AI models to know which one is more energy efficient? You can. Hugging Face has built the recommendation tool where you can compare because you don't need, a nuclear weapon versus a fork. Both examples of technology. Do you need to bring the gun to the knife fight every time? You do not. Sometimes you could just do something smaller and still get the job done, but have a lighter environmental impact. But how do you know which is the best model? And it's actually really good for capitalism because it improves competition. If I show that I can do the same thing as you with my model at 20% less environmental impact and I can charge you less for it, if that's good enough for the majority of what you're doing or even some of what you're doing, and you can have a mix and match plug and play model theory, then why not?
So, which probably answers another of the questions. Super interesting. Thank you. Is there any model that you know which is greener than the others, like the Ecosia of LLMs?
I don't want to quote anything today on stage. I would just urge you, you can do this research for yourself. I could tell you, or I could tell you how. Look up hugging face, like it sounds like the verb hugging, like we're hugging, and face, again, weird concepts to make you remember it. They have like the menu where you can compare, they have like star ratings, right? So if you're like 5 stars, great for this, even tells you this model is good for these tasks versus this is like 1 star. It's a super energy guzzling thing. Only use it if you absolutely must. That will give you, I hope, some transparency. But I can also look up later and email back if there's some other places where you can compare and contrast.
Uh, the IMF and the Bank of England are both warning of a dot-com era evaluations.
Mm.
So, if you're a leader making big AI bets right now, how do you tell the difference between infrastructure and bubble?
Yes.
Because you've said that you do agree with AI in certain contexts,
Mm.
so it's useful,
Mm.
but when is it hype?
Oh, I mean, I think we're in the hype moment now. I also think this is going to run and run mainly because of FOMO, like fear of missing out, the infrastructure, and frankly, the Trump administration. I'm sorry to get political here. It's just very difficult not to. What Trump did when he told Anthropic, you've got like 90 minutes to pull your most powerful models, only Americans can use them safely, woke everybody up to the existing reality of the stack, right? You should always, if you work in cybersecurity or indeed anything to do with resilience or business continuity, you think like that all the time, right? Are you paranoid if everyone's out to get you? You should be thinking always, what do I do if someone pulls this model? What do I do if I don't have access to this data set? What do I do if my power systems fails, right? There's a crazy weather event and everything just melts down. What do we do? How are we going to get through that? There's a storm. So I think in this case, that was a very painful moment for a lot of people. For those of us who've been working in this sector for a long time, it was like, welcome to the party. You're going to have to build like that. And that's why I think we're actually going to see more investment, more doubling down to secure the lower part of the stack, to have more choice, more optionality, more interoperability, and that plug and play model, which I think is good. We've been in a state where at the moment, the big magnificent seven so-called companies, it's like a cartel, right? That's not healthy. It's just not healthy for the economy. It's not actually very good for good design. The Chinese options, which are really interesting when the DeepSeek model came up, that actually got a lot of people freaked out. They called it a Sputnik moment. I thought it was great. Not because I'm not a patriot. I was like, good. because the United States has all this money, they can be super wasteful. They weren't doing what the Chinese had to do, which is they had to innovate because they couldn't get access to a bunch of things that the US government was keeping from them. But they wanted to get the same results and compete. So they had to find another way. And then they did. And they're like, here's our model. It's pretty much as good as, but for half the price. And it's like 90% more energy efficient. And that woke the Americans up when they were like, oh my God, like the Americans won't do sustainability to be nice. We are famously not a sustainable country in every way. We waste, waste, waste because we can. But we do respond to what the market wants. And that can be consumers as well as the stock market. So I think if people push for wanting sustainable AI, the transparency, the explainability, the accountability, that regulation piece that I think will have to come through legislation, but also through customer action. And the customer could be you, an individual, but the customer could also be you, a company, going, no, I won't buy you. I won't give you my business unless I can see this because I'm shopping around. Thank you very much. We have options now, which is why when the Europeans really start to come on, I think you're very early in where I think you're going to end up. You will have your own things that you can use, and if you can price them competitively and meet the demands of the consumers here, you won't have to rely so much on the American stack.
I think that's a great place to end it for now. We've
Yay.
got lots more questions in the group. I know there's one about Chicago pizza, so I'm going to recommend that you grab Stephanie and ask her your questions after the presentation, the end of today, which will be in about 15 minutes, and we'll all be outside in the sun with a glass of something cold. So please, in the meantime, join me in thanking Dr. Stephanie Hare for her wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.